What's up guys, Kyle here again, and today we are checking out the Randall Thrasher. Let's do it! Alright guys, hope you're doing great out there today. If this is your first time here at my channel, my name is Kyle, and what I do is I take awesome, high gain related guitar gear, I record it with a simple SM57 setup, and I give you the unprocessed audio on your end. So if you're into E-standard thrash riffs, drop C hardcore riffs, and dudes that can never quite get through a full sentence without tripping over their words, you're in the right place. Consider hitting the like button and subscribing on the way out so you don't miss any more of my stuff. Thanks! Alright guys, so up for some terrible riffing by myself today is the Randall Thrasher 120 here. If you've been following my channel for a little while, you know that I demoed the 50 watt, what the hell just happened to my accent? If you've been following my channel, you will know that I've demoed the 50 watt Randall Thrasher before, and I found it okay for my personal taste. Again, remember guys, everything here is just my opinion, so if it differs from your opinion, try not to take it too personally. But anyways, when I got this 120 watt model in, I wasn't really expecting much, and turns out that I like this one quite a bit. So yeah, I can't recite the differences between the 50 and the 120 watt model offhand because I'm not really super familiar with either of them off the top of my head, but since we have this one sitting right here in front of me, starting over here, we have both the low frequency and high frequency gains. Now again, you're not familiar with a lot of the later the later Randall offerings. They were kind of designed in part by Mike Fortin, and the low frequency, high frequency gain is something that you'll find on a lot of Fortin amplifiers. I just replaced an L with an R in that word. And then of course, we've got our gain. There is a boost control here because there is a foot switchable boost out front. I personally still prefer good old Tube Screamer style pedal in the front of the amp, but we will explore that boost as well. We've got our volume, bass, middle, treble, and then up here we have a three-way mid shift, which actually makes a massive difference when it comes to the overall voicing of the mids on this amp. And then skipping over the clean channel because who cares? We have our depth, presence, and master control for the power amp section of this amplifier. So for that intro clip, I was using my Gallagher Typhon here. We have a Seymour Duncan distortion in the bridge. We are going into a 1999 Mesa traditional 4x12 cab with the stock vintage 30s, SM57 on those vintage 30s, no post-processing to any of the sounds you're gonna hear from me today. We were boosting it with an Electric Eye Mud Killer, which is a fantastic boost for cleaning up the low and low mid frequencies and really just kind of turning any amp into a super tight thrash or modern metal monster. We've got an assortment of boosts to check out up here. And just in case you were wondering, yes, I do have a gate in front of the amp. I have the Deadweld Audio Golem gate. So everything is gonna stay fairly quiet. So with all that being said, let's put everything back to noon here. I'm gonna turn that boost off. I'm not gonna touch the volume. We're gonna leave the volumes where they were, and we're gonna leave the onboard boost off for the moment. I'm actually gonna pull this gain down to 9 o'clock, and we're gonna turn it on. We're gonna see what happens. I couldn't figure out what to say there, and it didn't come out very good. All right, so we have a pretty big volume disparity pushing all the gains down that low. Let's go ahead and turn that volume up a little bit to make up for that. Let's also turn the depth and the presence back to noon. Sounds kind of surprisingly good as a lower gain amp. If we were to add some treble and some presence. For a modern voiced amp, I feel like you could get away with some classic voiced riffs if you wanted to. Not sure why you would use this amp for something like that, but here we go. Honestly, it really isn't bad for that. Let's go ahead and bump that gain up a little bit though. Let's get it up to 11 o'clock. And the amp is already starting to saturate up a decent amount. Let's get it up to noon, and then we're gonna start playing around with the low frequency, high frequency gains. So we're starting to get some saturation. What happens if we boost this low frequency gain though? So not only does it add a little bit of saturation, but it also adds some thickness in the low mids. In my opinion, it kind of sounds a little like hollow or woody, not the frequencies that I personally would want to be enhancing on a metal amp. So let's pull that back. Let's bump up the high frequency gain. Those are the frequencies that I think that you would be wanting to push on an amp like this. Let's push it all the way up. Got a lot of hiss through the speakers, so I'm assuming it's gonna make a big difference. Honestly, that doesn't sound bad to me. Like, that's kind of a nice mid-gain tone. If we were to boost the bass up quite a bit, that's a nice cutting mid-gain tone. And if we were to add some depth to thicken things up a little bit, I don't hate that. That sounds pretty good, but just for the sake of this video, let's pull the high gain back a little bit. Let's push that low gain back down a little bit as well. Okay, let's get a little bit more presence on this because it's sounding a little muffled, and let's push those mids just a tad. All right, pushing that presence up made a big difference. Let's pull that back. All right, so now we need to actually boost this gain up to get some saturation out of the amp. All right, so at the moment, we're a little bit too thin. Let's push that low frequency gain up a little bit. There we go. We've now added some kind of girth to the sound. It's got a little bit more low mid emphasis. It doesn't sound so thin. All right, so it still sounds a little bloated for me and not enough saturation. Let's go ahead and kick on that onboard boost. We have the boost volume at noon. That seems to be adding a lot of just signal. It seems like a clean boost, which is going to fatten your signal up pretty significantly. It's not really what we want, not what I want on this amp anyways. Let's push that low frequency gain back down. All right, that's a little bit more like it. Let's push that high frequency gain up a little bit and the overall gain up. All right, so we're kind of getting closer, but it still has this like thuddiness to the low end. It doesn't really have a nice percussive punch. It doesn't have that kind of clankiness that a lot of more modern amps tend to have. Let's push that boost up even more. All right, so I'm gonna pull back the low frequency gain a tad. I'm gonna pull the bass back a little bit, and let's add a little treble and a little mid. No, that does not sound good. That's really quacky. Let's pull the mid and treble back. All right, so I mean, we're kind of getting there with the onboard boost. Let's try the shift, the mid shift here. Let's put it in the middle position. That kind of scoops out those high mids pretty significantly and gives us an overall scooped sound. And in the bottom, I feel like the top is a good balance of the two. The middle is scooped, and then the bottom is like really mid forward. That honestly gives us a pretty percussive low end. I'm not hating that. Let's turn the onboard boost off. Let's push that gain all the way up. We still just have like a low mid bubble that kind of needs to go away in my personal opinion. We're gonna go ahead and try boost. Let's try the Boss SD1 in the classic mode here. All right guys, so we have a hot pickup and we have an overdrive out front, and the gain is dimed, and that's all the saturation we have. So this is not like a super gainy amp by any means. But it sounds pretty good like that. I do think that it is a little bit too much in that high frequency gain. Let's pull that a tad back and let's pull the low frequency gain up. Let's go back to that top position on the mid shift. I don't hate that. That's my favorite so far. Let's bump that bass up a little bit, and let's actually pull the mids back just a tad. And let's add some treble to compensate. All right, so we're getting there. A little bit more bass, a little bit more depth to fill out that low end. I don't hate that. The amp has excellent clarity. I dig the gain structure. It is on the drier side, but this is probably my favorite of the Fortin design Randall amps. I think that this one sounds pretty good in the room, honestly. Let's try a different boost real quick. Let's try the classic Ibanez TS9. That gives us a little bit of a rounder mid. Let's actually add some mids back in. I think that sounds great. All right guys, sounds great with this guitar, but let's try something with a little lower output pickup and see how it handles that, because as of right now, we don't have a ton of saturation, and this is a hot pickup. All right guys, Dunable D2RE, got it wrong again, R2DE. This has the stock pickups in it. I don't know the model offhand, but if you look it up, these are fairly low output, especially compared to that Duncan distortion. Yeah, you can hear a big difference in the saturation already. And that's with the gain dimed. So we're gonna have to figure out a way to come up with more gain if we want a super saturated tone. So let's turn off that Ibanez TS9 tube screamer. Let's see how this thing takes a TC integrated preamp style boost, because that's what the blue channel on the dead weld is. All right, so it doesn't get overloaded like some amps do. Let's put it all the way up. All right, what happens if we combine that with the onboard boost and pull the level back a little bit? All right, so let's pull the mids back just a tad, treble back just a tad. All right, so we're getting there. Let's add a little more low frequency, a little bit more high frequency gain. I just don't like what that low frequency gain does when you get it above noon. It's too woofy in the low mid. But now we have it very tight. It's a little on the dry side, so if you suck like me, you're gonna have to tighten up your playing in order to make it sound not bad. So as you can see, super revealing. Every little thing that I missed in that riff, and there was a lot, you can pick up pretty clearly. So now let's go to the opposite side of the spectrum. Let's check it out with active pickups and see how it reacts to that. All right guys, LTD Phoenix Black Metal with the Fishman Fluence Modern Ceramic. It actually sounds like we're hitting the front of the amp too hard now. Let's go back to that tube screamer. Okay guys, so now we have plenty of saturation. We can actually probably pull that high frequency gain back a tad, add a little low frequency gain, and maybe add a little bit of treble for some bite. Now we've got a good amount of saturation. We're going in the passive input though. What happens if we go into the active input? Definitely a very dry chug overall. I prefer going into the passive input and rolling that gain back a little bit. Let's try that middle setting. All right, so that's how it sounds in E standard. Let's go down to drop C and hit a hardcore riff and see how it takes the lower tuning. All right guys, Gibson Les Paul Custom stock 498T in the bridge. sounds brutal. It sounds mean. It just seems lacking in the mids where I personally like them a little bit, but you guys might feel differently. Last but not least, try 7-string. All right, guys, we're going back over to the Mud Killer. We have my Schecter PT here, Hellraiser Hybrid with the EMG 57 in the bridge. All right, so this particular 7-string is very tight on the low end, so we're kind of boosting the lows across the board, including that low frequency gain. All right, guys, that's gonna do it for me today on the Randall Thrasher 120. What did you guys think about this thing? Let me know down in the comments, as I'm always curious to see your thoughts on the amps that I play, on the tones that I got, and if you have any experience with these things. Do you think that they sound better than I got them to sound here in the video? Do you think my assessment was accurate? I'll be sure to meet you down there to chat about it. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Kyle here again.
You know what this wall is missing? Another amp. There we go.